What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to the reveal of the number 13 team in my 2022 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the Dallas Cowboys. Before we get started, if you could do me a huge favor, please take a moment to hit that like button down below. Really will support my channel in a free, easy, meaningful way. I really appreciate it. Also, if you enjoy the video, do make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of these team previews as we lead up to the start of the season and the number one team in my rankings. But let's get into the Cowboys, a team that had a fascinating offseason, one of the few teams around the league that you can look at and say, did they really get better, at least on paper? And I think it's pretty easy to say that with a loss of talent that they might be taking, at least again in terms of roster talent, a step back from where they were last year, especially on the offensive side of the ball where they're losing some very big name players. Two starters on the offensive line, La'el Collins, granted he missed about half of last season, and Connor Williams at left guard. But potentially even more noteworthy, two big name at this point, starting caliber receivers, Amari Cooper speaks for himself, and Cedric Wilson, who actually made a dynamic impact on this team last year. He heads to Miami, so definitely losing some firepower and some protection on that offensive line, but defensively as well. Randy Gregory is going to be out the door, as well as DeMonte Casey, who got starting reps for them at safety. Some smaller losses as well. Blake Jarwin, their number 2 tight end, who got hurt halfway through the year last year. Keanu Neal, kind of a weak side passing downs linebacker for them. And Greg Zuerlein, their kicker last year, who had a down year for sure, is gone as well. So again, some pretty major losses on both sides of the ball there. And not a ton of major additions either. This is a team that had to suffer some of these losses because they were a little bit cap strapped, and really just adding players by getting some guys back healthy and through the draft, along with some minor free agent additions. So their key additions for me are Tyler Smith, first round pick, going to be starting, it looks like, at left guard this year. And they do get DeMarcus Lawrence back healthy. That's important to remember when you look at that Randy Gregory loss, that, DeMarcus Lawrence missed over half of last season, and they're really hoping he can be back and healthy as their number one edge player. And then a pretty decent list of notable additions, but nothing major here. I do think Jalen Tolbert, a third-round draft pick at wide receiver, now really being flushed into an opportunity due to the injury of one of their other additions here, James Washington, could end up being a big addition. We'll talk more about him when we get into the roster portion of this video. But they also add a tight end I liked, Jake Ferguson, in the 4th round. And defensively, hoping to get a couple of interior linemen back healthy. Neville Gallimore, Tristan Hill, both guys missed more than half of last season. And then they do add Dante Fowler into the mix on the edge. Sam Williams, an athletic 2nd round pick out of Ole Miss, into the mix with that D-line. And most recently, they did sign Anthony Barr to that linebacker room. So it wasn't an offseason without additions. They didn't just sit back and do nothing, but some very big name players that need to be replaced here that I'm looking forward to talking about who can step into those roles and if they'll be able to live up to those shoes, I suppose. Fill those shoes, I suppose. You're never going to be Amari Cooper. You're never going to be Randy Gregory, or maybe you will be Randy Gregory. I don't know, but at least replace some of those losses in a meaningful way. But first, I do want to talk about this coaching staff, along with the scheme that these guys are going to run on both sides of the ball. So Mike McCarthy, the head coach, Mike McFraud, as I like to call him. I just don't get it with Mike McCarthy. I never would have hired him in the first place. I would have fired him after year one. I would have fired him after last year. This is a coach that really outstayed his welcome in Green Bay, probably cost them at least one championship by running teams that didn't just get stale on offense, which is supposed to be his thing, right? Offensive-minded head coach, but Never figured it out on defense. No foresight on that side of the ball. Special teams always sucked. Lackluster playoff performances where the team shows up lacking physicality, getting beat up at the line of scrimmage, something that was eerily familiar in this team's playoff loss against the 49ers. He is not even the offensive coordinator here. He has kind of his bear claws on the offense, and they do some of the stuff he wants to do, but it is Kellen Moore's offense. It's Dan Quinn's defense. I just don't understand what Mike McCarthy is supposed to bring to the table. Okay, so he's supposed to be the CEO now. He's not some great leader of men. Like, I guess he can walk around with his Super Bowl ring and say, "Oh, I've done big things in this league." Oh, don't mind the fact that it was carried by a great defense and a Hall of Fame quarterback. No, I've won a Super Bowl, so you guys should listen to me. Like, maybe he's good at like setting practice schedules and being a yes man for Jerry Jones. But beyond that, I just don't get the Mike McCarthy thing here. I rank him the 28th head coach in the league, and that might be generous. It is nice, however, that they really have two head coach caliber coordinators in place under him, and I do think it more than makes up for the lack of anything that Mike McCarthy could be bringing to the table. So with Kellen Moore at offensive coordinator, has done such a great job here. Just 34 years old, already getting head coach interviews, and has just orchestrated a really creative offense here. You are going to get some of the Mike McCarthy influence. It's a zone scheme specifically. Mike McCarthy's always been a zone run game, and you definitely see a heavy dose of those kind of quick hitting, almost alert screens built into the run game. That's always been a Mike McCarthy staple, and that influence shows here in Kellen Moore's version of this offense. But he brings so much more creativity to the passing concepts, especially. There's a lot of levels to this passing game, both literally and metaphorically. I think it's a deep passing game that really buys into Dak's ability to read defenses and get through complicated progressions. But additionally, literally levels concepts where it's a lot of mesh and layering of zones. And it's just a really well-designed passing game. And some Cowboys fans say he's a bad coordinator. He's 34 years old. There's going to be some situations where, like literally on situational football, like tough third downs, where he doesn't have a full goodie bag of tricks to dive into. He's still developing himself as an offensive coordinator. I don't think he's some elite mind or anything, but I've been overwhelmingly impressed with him. I think the NFL has as well. And ideally, you can continue to groom him as your head coach of the future before someone else rolls the dice on a 34-year-old with 5 years of coaching experience as a head coach. So he's running the show offensively. And then defensively, you have Dan Quinn, really is your part-time head coach here, honestly. He is in charge of the defense. Was the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. And a guy with just literally all of the experience. He goes all the way back to the early 2000s where he worked for Jim Mora's son for the 49ers. He worked for Nick Saban's Dolphins, believe it or not. I didn't know that until I was prepping for this video. He worked for Eric Mangini on the Jets and then started the Seattle 3 era of his career that he's known for with Gus Bradley and that Pete Carroll Seahawks defense, the early Legion of Boom era. And he eventually overtook Gus Bradley. And Dan Quinn was the defensive coordinator of the 2013, 14, 15 Seahawks that you could argue were the prime of the Legion of Boom. So he's known for that cover 3, 4-3, Seattle 3 defense. And he took it to Atlanta, where I think the league had really started to catch up at that point. That was when, at least early in Dan Quinn's career, Kyle Shanahan was really becoming a household name and became an offense that, let's just say, as Dan Quinn's career went on, the rest of the league was, clearly adapting, and now over half the league runs Shanahan-style offenses. The reason I bring that up is that offense is specifically designed to shred the Seattle 3, and I do think it ultimately hurt Dan Quinn. But ends up coming to Dallas here and says, screw it. I don't need to be stuck to Seattle 3. No, I know way more football than just cover 3. And boy, did he show it last year. Creative fronts, getting away from 4-3 fronts, being 3-3-5 odd, 3-4, 4-3, mixing it all up, using Micah Parsons in a creative way. Still using some of those influences from the Seattle 3 with, say, a J-Ron Curse coming down into the box in the Cam Chancellor mold, if you will. And Dan Quinn ran about as much cover 1 as anybody in the league last year, became just a man-attacking defense that was really respectable. So he's kind of entering this new stage of his career that's really exciting to see. It's not that he doesn't run cover 3. That was his second most preferred coverage, and they are more of a single high team. But man, he really got back to the drawing board, kind of took a step back from being the head coach and said, let me just focus on defense, doing what I do well, and really drew up a fun scheme. So was really impressed with Dan Quinn, really impressed with Kellen Moore. They don't rank horribly for the actually coach rankings that factor into my overall formula. They rank 8th for pass game coaching, 20th for run game coaching, 12th for defensive coaching. So, like I said, these guys more than compensate for the complacency of Mike McCarthy, but you still wish you had at least some like great leader of men ahead of these coordinators. Like, imagine if this team had a Harbaugh or, one of those, maybe a Mike Tomlin, one of those really inspiring head coaches that elevates everybody on top of good coordinators. And McCarthy just doesn't bring that. So I do think it's a liability to have McFraud as your head coach. But again, they compensate it well. But now let's get into this roster, ranking each position group, talking about how they stack up against the rest of the league. And that's going to start where we're going to talk about the quarterback here. And with Dak, the discourse is always a little tough because I do think he's a difficult quarterback to rank. Because he's paid high-end elite quarterback money, of course. No problem with that. I think Dak is much closer to being the solution here than the problem or anything like that. And I totally understand them paying him and building this team around him. But on the other hand, there has been a little bit of that lack of like week 1 through the playoffs, great quarterback season. It always seems to be something with Dak that sometimes it's a legitimate excuse. Some excuses are less legitimate, but there's always some sort of an excuse, whether it's the O-line got beat up, the receivers got beat up, he got beat up, that just derails his season a little bit. And I just think Dak has yet to show that he is full go, a quarterback that you win because of, as opposed to a quarterback you win with. And right now, I do have him in that tier with Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, Ryan Tannehill. Again, quarterbacks you can win with, but not necessarily because of. I do struggle with that, though, because he's more of a playmaker. He's more athletic. And I think his pocket presence, that sort of it factor that we've talked about, the ability to sense pressure, knowing when to get out of the pocket, it's not great. It is something I have a hold up with on Dak, but I do think it's a step ahead of, say, Carr, Cousins, Tannehill. It's just sometimes there are moments with Dak where he's so methodical, so to the book, that I wish he was a little bit more creative on some of those critical downs. I think that's more of a real tangible point with him that has held him back in some of those big time games and has held him back as far as the discussion of, is he a great top 10, maybe even elite quarterback, if you will. There's just always been a little bit of some holdup with Dak. Now, again, ranks 12th, ranks at the very top of that tier, is the solution here. And I almost think because he has had some pretty legitimate excuses, whether he's hurt or his offensive line's hurt or his receivers are getting hurt, he hasn't had a clean opportunity to, as I said, have a full season of great quarterback play. But you can grab 5 weeks here, 3 weeks there, where Dak is playing like a top 5 quarterback. Again, it has been when he's got the system around him clicking. But man, it was fun to go back and watch Dak Prescott prepping for this video, because I don't think we've had a quarterback yet that is so methodical, so good at reading defenses, so good pre-snap, understands the geometry of the defense against zone, will throw with anticipation, very good decision maker in structure. So that's outstanding. It's what gets him into the top third of quarterbacks in the league. I just need to see a little bit more of that and a little bit more of that sustained great quarterback play before I'm comfortable maybe moving him up into that tier 2 with guys like Burrow, Lamar Jackson, even Kyler Murray. I think has all that it factor to be above Dak, even if they are a little bit closer. But Dak ranks 12th for me. The backup situation's a mess. You got to keep Dak healthy. But let's move on and talk about who he's going to be throwing the football to. I ranked the Cowboys 13th for weapons. I believe we had the Vikings 13th when I did their deep dive. The Vikings are climbing up to 12th. They were very tight, the grades on the Cowboys and the Vikings. But James Washington goes down several days ago. He's going to miss, it looks like, about half the season. And I do think that drops them just below the Vikings now. So the Vikings are going to climb up to 12th. It's just the reality of this series, where you're going to have some movement as we go on. That's a 3-month series. Some of these ratings are going to be fluid based on injuries, signings. As I watch the film, I might develop a new opinion on guys. So I have seen some comments like, I thought this team ranked here. How is this team coming here? I will be releasing my full spreadsheet, my final spreadsheet, on my Patreon at the end of all this. So if you want to go support, I'm going to release it for anybody that's signed up there, regardless of tier level. But anyway, back to this group of weapons, ranking 13th in the league. You start with, to me, a true alpha ascending superstar wide receiver in CeeDee Lamb. And for whatever reason, be it all of the movement with wide receivers in the league this year, or the fact that the Cowboys offense did taper off a little bit as the year went on, I think we've lost sight of the fact of how freaking good CeeDee Lamb was last year. I think he's ascending towards being a top 5 receiver in the NFL. Was blown away with everything he's added to his game, to what was already very good tape coming out of Oklahoma. I think he's added a little bit of functional strength to be more of a contested ball winner. I think he's continued to develop his routes, and you're seeing all of that on top of what we knew about him coming out of Oklahoma. The vertical speed, the incredible run after catch ability, the leaping ability, and ability to attack the football in the air. It's all there. And now is the true number one, which he basically was last year, with Amari Cooper being more of a secondary option here, which is insane. He to me has a chance to lead the league in receiving yards, to have that ridiculous season where he enters that conversation with Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams. I see him as that good of a receiver. So I almost feel like people have forgotten about him slightly. Not that people think he's bad or anything, but he's a superstar wide receiver already, and a massive asset for this team, a true do-it-all focal point of the passing game. Beyond him, you have actually a pretty significant number of question marks with your next 3 wide receivers, really. You got Michael Gallup coming off a ACL injury. We don't know when he's going to be good to go and how full speed he's going to be. Jalen Tolbert in his rookie year, don't know what he's going to be for sure. And James Washington, who's just got hurt. He broke his foot, and he's going to be down for 6 to 10 weeks as of this recording. So just a lot of question marks beyond CeeDee Lamb. But when Michael Gallup is back, ideal number 2 for Dak, because as the coverage is being pulled towards CeeDee Lamb, Dak is a quarterback that loves to put the ball up. As we alluded to, some of those issues, maybe not an amazing it factor on third down. I do think that drop and shoot style is very much there with Dak, where in a pinch, in a tough situation, he really likes to just find Michael Gallup, throw that well-placed back shoulder or that go-get-it jump ball, and Gallup can make a 50-50 ball a 60-40 ball, and Dak's kind of accuracy in those situations can make it maybe a 70-30 ball. So it is a weapon for this offense. And I think there's a big reason they actually kind of ended on choosing Michael Gallup over Amari Cooper, because they feel like they have their number one in CeeDee Lamb. What they wanted was a perimeter ball winner for those situations for Dak. And that was Michael Gallup. The thing that's always held Amari Cooper back is those ball-winning abilities. So it makes total sense here. They're going to make sure he's full go before they bring him back, but there doesn't seem to be any major concerns, and he might be ready week one. We just kind of have to wait and see there. It doesn't have a major impact on this team's grade. I think he will be ready to go and have a great season. It just maybe he will miss a week or two. That's where it is kind of frustrating that James Washington's going to miss the first part of the year, and then you're counting on a rookie as this team's number 2 wide receiver right now in Jalen Tolbert. So I liked the James Washington signing. I'm actually going to talk about him briefly here because he would have been this team's number 3 wide receiver and still might be when he comes back. In 11 personnel, they love CeeDee Lamb in the slot, and James Washington is a great skill set complementary to Gallup on the outside, CeeDee Lamb in the slot, because he is just a vertical, up and down the sidelines threat. And I think similarly of Jalen Tolbert as well, but I think James Washington was going to really have a chance to surprise here after the last few years being with Big Ben, an offense surrounded with other players where Washington wasn't getting the usage and also wasn't getting good looks vertical down the field because of the way that offense looked with Big Ben. So coming in here, I really was excited to see a guy on a 1-year deal to maybe really surprise here. And he's still going to have an opportunity to get healthy and get that job back. But it feels pretty likely at this point that Jalen Tolbert's going to win that job and not look back. I like Jalen Tolbert. I didn't love him. I liked him. I had a 3rd-round grade on him. I didn't think them getting him was some massive steal or anything, or that he's like some guaranteed breakout player. I think he's a really good 3rd-round wide receiver prospect, which can be hit or miss. I don't think he's an amazing athlete. I don't think he's going to pull away and stack a lot of corners on the outside. My pro comp for him, though, was James Jones, who, if you remember, for Green Bay was a great 3rd wide receiver, work the sidelines, back shoulders, jump balls, hitch routes, comebacks, be that vertical worker as a perimeter receiver, similar to James Washington in a lot of ways. So makes sense for him to play that role. He's just going to have to prove it as a rookie, right? So he's more than capable of being that player in year 1. I would bet on him to do that at this point because I think this is a great situation for him. But again, needs to prove it. Then you have Noah Brown as a 5th. Really good 5th wide receiver, big body dude, good run blocker. Nice kind of piece to have as depth. There's some buzz for TJ Vasher, 6'6" tree of a wide receiver. I think they have enough kind of go get it big body dudes at this point. We'll see. Maybe he makes the team. They clearly have a type with that. I would more keep an eye on Simi Fehoko. Was a 4th-round pick last year. I think with the opportunity in front of him, he has a lot of physical ability. There doesn't seem to be a lot of buzz about him, but I liked him as for where they got him. I like him as a big slot type. So just someone to keep an eye on. And then beyond that, they do have some interesting pieces. Brandon Smith is a good vertical threat for Iowa. Drummond, Deontay Drummond, right? Was a kind of a really poor man's A.J. Brown type at Ole Miss. Physical dude, catch crossing routes, good after a catch, built like a running back type, just not as physically gifted. So they do have some interesting depth. They're going to have to kind of figure out this room. And I think they'll be really good with their weaponry. Just some question marks maybe at the start of the year to sort through. It also helps to have a true, good Y tight end in Dalton Schultz playing on the franchise tag, which I get maybe not committing to some massive tight end contract, which those contracts are pretty crazy right now. And I'm going to, ring my own bell a little bit here. I had Jake Ferguson's pro comp as Dalton Schultz. So with Schultz playing on the tag here, I would keep an eye on Jake Ferguson to be groomed into this role as a tight end too, and overtake that role and really not miss a beat, because I can really just talk about these guys interchangeably. Outstanding short route running ability, wiggle in their routes, option routes, read a zone, get to the right spot, turn your head, and with Dak's timing, it's perfect with a guy like Dalton Schultz or what's going to be Jake Ferguson. Right when he looks and throws up his hands, the ball's already there. So it's why it's such a great fit. I always bring this up, and I always get crap from Cowboys fans. It is the Jason Witten role. I've always thought Witten was a little bit overstated because he really just caught like stick routes and converted third downs, but he did it consistently for like 15 years for the Dallas Cowboys. That's the same player, more or less. Such a reliable weapon on third down. Not some crazy mismatch problem. Not someone that defenses are like terrified of, but that is part of what makes them so dangerous is they're so worried about CD and they have been worried about Cooper that, they kind of keep their eye off Dalton Schultz, and then all of a sudden he finds that soft spot in the zone, makes a guy miss, gets upfield, and you've just converted a 3rd and 9 with a 6-yard dump off. So I think he's a perfect fit here with what Dak likes to do. And I think Jake Ferguson will be the same next year when they let Dalton Schultz go. You have Jeremy Sprinkle, kind of a big-bodied, all-name team type of guy as a tight end 3, whatever. Sean McKeon got on the field last year. That's probably your group right there. And then with these running backs, Tony Pollard's the better receiving back, but they'll still use Zeke a lot on third downs. He is still a great pass protector and is fine in the receiving game. Just at this point, not the most fluid route runner, not incredible hands. He'll make some great catches, but there's some frustrating drops in there as well. These guys are going to split time and provide, I would just say, good relief in the receiving game as running backs. Not really worth mentioning too much beyond those two because it's going to be all about them. So obviously not a whole lot of concerns as far as the passing elements here with the quarterback and the weaponry. And let's now talk about the offensive line. So it's a good pass blocking group with some question marks, and they rank 15th, which kind of makes sense with that description. So you've got Tyron Smith at left tackle, hasn't had a full season of health since 2016, so you're expecting again maybe 12 games there. But when he's in there, he's a top 5 offensive tackle in the league, maybe top 3. Was playing his best football in a while last year in the time that he was out there. Did, again, miss some time. Maybe he stays healthy for a full year. He's only like 31, I think. It's not crazy to think that's possible. And if he does, that's like house money. But, man, you can count on him when he's in there. That's for damn sure. Especially as a run blocker where he is just a deleter of men. He's kind of Trent Williams light, and that's a massive compliment because Trent Williams is a god. But as far as athleticism, instincts on the move, you're going to see a lot of similar plays, I guess, from Tyron Smith that you will from Trent Williams, who's getting all the love right now. But then you have at left guard, definitely a question mark with Tyler Smith. Hated his pass pro technique at left tackle. Should be protected a little bit better at guard. Really incredible athlete. That's why he went in the first round. His get off, his power, it's all there. Again, it's why he was a first round pick, and it's going to make him an effective run blocker day one. You're hoping that good development here, surrounded by a Tyron Smith, that he can just be adequate as a pass blocker, move guys in the run game, and have a good rookie year. I wasn't crazy about him as a first round player, I'm not going to lie. But I understand what they see in him and what the plan is for him. I like starting him at guard. This is identical to what they did with La'el Collins, who started at guard in year one and then eventually kicked back out to tackle. Maybe that's their long-term plan. Maybe he's an awesome guard. He's too good at run blocking on the inside that they just keep him there. Either way, the upside is certainly there. I do expect learning curves at left guard, though, and they're going to want to help him. Tyler Biadasz at center, perfectly average starting center, has had nice career development, was never some super high upside player, and he certainly had his learning curves early on, but I think he's just a stable starting caliber center there. Really nothing more, nothing less, and he's good both in pass pro and as a run blocker. And with his experience at this point, a good signal caller up front is going to help as far as blitz pickup and communication and stuff. Zach Martin at right guard, the best right guard in football. I'm sorry, Colts fans. Well, I guess I can just say the best right guard. But I do think the best guard in general in football. I think run blocking, right there with Big Q. Pass blocking, I think he's more consistent. And there's really not a whole lot else to add on Zach Martin other than he's elite and one of the 3 best offensive linemen in football right now. Obviously someone that's going to elevate this group. I think he's elevated Biadasz to the point he's at, and I think it helps Terrence Steele knowing oftentimes he's got that inside help. Terrence Steele had a good year last year. A undrafted pickup out of Texas Tech who is a really strong player. Definitely, to me, shows the physical tools that suggests maybe he should have at least been drafted. He has his issues. He didn't go undrafted for no reason. Pass protection has been very hit or miss for him. So that's going to be the big question there is how well is he handling highly polished pass rushers? How quick can he get back in his kick slide technique? How far along can he come in that kick slide technique? He has the tools to continue developing. I think they like this group. As far as Terrence Steele at right tackle, Tyler Smith at left guard, there's a world where both Smith and Steele grow into established starting caliber players this year at their respective positions here. But I also think they have on their radar that Steele might be a little bit of a Band-Aid, definitely a better pass protector now than anybody else they have. But I think they're just kind of doing a trial year here with Terrence Steele, who was good last year, showed some flashes, and I don't think he's going to be a complete liability, but you're going to want to give him some help as well. So to me, that's your projected starting 5. You do have some interesting pieces that we need to talk about as depth. It's a lot of unproven guys as depth, but there's some pieces that they've kind of invested in here that all kind of have some upside that if you can get one of these other players to really impress in camp and in practice, you might have someone in here that you can turn to, whether it's at tackle or guard. So starting at tackle, you got really 2 project types, Josh Ball and Matt Waletzko. They have a type with these mid-round tackles. They are taking freaks with length and upside and hoping that the off-field can come. So very similar 2 players there. And like I said, keep an eye. If they've come along well, you might see them turn to one of these guys who have a higher upside than a Terrence Steele at right tackle. Likewise on the interior, you have Connor McGovern, who was, I believe, a 3rd-round pick, maybe a 4th-round pick out of Penn State. And I would say look to Alec Lindstrom, an undrafted pickup who I had, I believe, a 4th-round grade on, maybe even a 3rd. Both these guys, really good athletes. Connor McGovern was used as a fullback for them, and you'll even see him listed in the key run-blocking skill players because he will play in big packages as an extra tackle, a tight end, a fullback. So you know that athleticism is in there. They've even had him go out running routes. So and when he played guard in limited opportunities, I think he had a couple starts, he played pretty well. I think there's a decent chance that he's actually a better guard right now than Tyler Smith. And he has some size to provide flexibility as a swing all-around kind of 4-position offensive lineman. So I love having Connor Williams as depth and potentially someone that could end up as a starter here. And then Alec Lindstrom, to me, really an amazing fit for a wide zone offense. That's not exactly what they have here. This is more of an inside zone system. But someone with great athleticism. His brother Chris is a star guard for the Falcons. He's not Chris as far as play strength goes, but I definitely thought Alec Lindstrom should have been drafted. I don't understand that. So they pick him up, be a backup center, maybe can develop into a long-term replacement for Tyler Biadasz, who is approaching a new contract. So a pretty deep offensive line. I think those 4 that we talked about will be the backups. Matt Farniok, they drafted last year. I believe he started 1 game or got reps in the Week 18 game and did okay. So that's probably the 10 guys that make this team with nobody else here really worth mentioning. So 15th for pass blocking with some real strengths there and really 2 kind of question marks. So that makes sense why they would come in the middle. And then with the run blocking, they do rank 7th. I mean, you have 2 of the best run blockers at their positions in Tyler Smith and Martin. And I think, Tyron Smith. And then Tyler Smith, I think, will be great as a rookie. I think Terrence Steele's better at it than he is in pass pro. So a little bit better for run blocking. And then as far as the skill players contributing to the blocking rating there for the run game, Dalton Schultz, a good run blocking tight end. Jake Ferguson projects to be a good run blocking tight end coming out of Wisconsin. Maybe needs to add a little bit of play strength, but in general, I think you'll have good blocking from the tight ends. We mentioned Connor McGovern. And then CeeDee Lamb, not the best run blocker, slender guy, not sure the buy-in's all there. Michael Gallup as well. Buy-in has been a little bit of a question for him. So a little bit shaky as far as the receivers, but they do get some good blocking from the tight ends there. And then before we get to the defensive side of the ball, we need to revisit these running backs as far as the actual run game is concerned. So they rank 10th for me at running back. You've got a really nice 1-2 punch here, one of the better ones in the league. Zeke and Tony Pollard. Zeke is not an elite running back, at least at this point. He is a downhill bruiser at this point, who's basically just going to throw his body on the line, get you 15, 20 carries a game, full speed ahead. And if he gets a lane, he still has some of that, home run speed. He is, to me, a very good running back. But at this point, a little bit stiff and lacks a little bit of that creativity as a runner that I think Tony Pollard brings. Some of that speed and creativity as a runner. And it does play off each other really nicely. I will say Tony Pollard's actually been the better running back the last couple of years if he got Zeke's workload and had to deal with the heavy boxes and the early down usage as consistently. I don't know if he would do better than Zeke. I don't know if there's film to suggest that he wouldn't. But either way, there's a weird narrative around these running backs, and I've certainly said Zeke is overrated, and I think rating him at 83 is accounting for that. But it doesn't mean it isn't a good running back room. You're just paying way too freaking much, and it costed you Amari Cooper to pay Zeke $17 million or whatever ridiculous amount of money it is. But he is still here. He's still a really good running back paired with I'm not going to say the best number 2 running back in the league because you got A.J. Dillon, you got Kareem Hunt, you got some other guys out there, but Pollard is one of the best RB2s in the league and would be starting on a lot of teams around the NFL, and I think will be next year. So really nice 1-2 punch, almost a laughable lack of depth behind those guys. I think they feel pretty good about these guys getting almost all of the workload and not having to worry about who their depth is. And you can always probably go find another back if you have a serious injury. So they rank 10th for me at running back. And then they do get a little boost from the QB run multiplier as well. Dak Prescott is very good on read options. He has a power element to his game as a runner, so that is a boost to the run game as well. So when you put all this together, you, to me, get the 11th best passing game, the 7th best run game, and ironically, the 13th best offense overall. I know it doesn't always make sense, but with the formula, some of the teams that are maybe more elite in one regard might not have the balance that, say, the Cowboys do, but can push you over the edge, so to speak. But anyway, this is going to be a really good offense. It's not going to be the problem. They might have some matchup-dependent hiccups. They might have a little bit of like a slower start with those receivers and the young offensive linemen like Tyler Smith getting up to speed, but it should be a pretty well-oiled machine. It's a really balanced offense, kind of good or great at every position with a pretty good coordinator at the helm. So really not worried about the Cowboys offense, even though there's some kind of offseason narratives that I think are legitimate, like things to point to and say they could take a step back, but overall they have everything in front of them to be a playoff caliber offense, really. And they are the highest ranking team in the NFC East for me because of the offense. As we turn to the defense, much more question marks throughout the roster here. And I'm changing up the format here again, constantly trying to improve this series. Definitely give me your feedback for those that have followed this series. I am going to do really more position by position breakdowns here as opposed to that overarching outlook here. I think it's going to make it easier to follow. But yeah, let's start by talking about the defensive line here. And that's going to include Micah Parsons, who's kind of this positionless player. I just give him the term agent of chaos with the pass rush because he's going to play some edge. He'll play mugged up on the center as like a blitzing linebacker. He'll put his hand in the dirt as a defensive end. He'll do a little bit of everything here as well as also play linebacker. So he kind of adds an interesting narrative to this whole thing. But the Cowboys rank 11th for me for pass rush. Really good unit there. 31st, though, for D-line run defense. A lot of major question marks there. So to me, this is really all about those 2-star pass rushers that you have. Micah Parsons as that agent of chaos who moves around everywhere, throws off blitz protections, can create phantom pressure because he is such a attention suck that you're gonna shift towards him, and all of a sudden you might have a blitzing DB or another linebacker. Maybe this year it's Anthony Barr, who's not even really listed here, but because he is someone that you walk up to the line, you don't know where he's going to line up, and then you got to set your protections. You can drop him into coverage, and all of a sudden you aren't accounting for a blitzer coming from a different direction. So his presence is elite. And that's before you even get to like what he does actually as a rusher, because there's a reason teams are so worried about him. He looks like frickin' Khalil Mack in his prime as a rusher. He has length, get off, and real power, and it's just raw. Like the raw tools he has have made him one of the best pass rushers in all of football, and that's before even like really working on counter moves and different rush moves that he can go to. No, he pretty much has a bull rush, a speed to bend move, and a rip move, and a blitzer who can just blow up running backs. And that alone has made him, again, per snap, by far the most productive pass rusher in all of football last year. So we're just starting to kind of comprehend what he is as a rusher. And defenses are just starting to kind of comprehend how they use him as a rusher. So there is maybe some variance there as far as how efficient he's going to be. Again, his efficiency was probably unsustainable, but with his tools, they might not be. He's where it all starts. And then you have DeMarcus Lawrence, who was dominant when he was out there last year, but missed most of last season with an injury. So when you look at them and say, well, they're losing Randy Gregory, how are they going to repeat the pass rush? Remember, they didn't have DeMarcus Lawrence, who's better than Randy Gregory for the majority of their season. So he comes back on a team-friendly deal, really good bargain for him. I will say it's possible that the NFL is a little worried about his health, given how low that contract was. But it could just be he loves Dallas, he wants to be here, and was willing to stay, take a discount. So, man, talk about Khalil Mack. I mean, he has a similar skill set as well, as that length, power driving ability. He has a little bit more of that refined pass rush skill set. He's more of a true edge. You know more where he's going to line up. But even in Dan Quinn's defense last year, when he came back, they used him as a 3-tech, as a 4-eye in different odd packages. So really versatile pass rusher. And I think assuming he can stay healthy, I think he's going to remain kind of a top 10 or so edge rusher. He's really freaking good, and I think people sleep on him sometimes. So a dominant duo there. And then you just have this mishmash of different skill sets and a lot of depth and talent. You don't have that high-end Randy Gregory piece opposite of a Parsons now, but you have Dorrance Armstrong, who's going to play a lot of early down work. Really commendable for him to gain weight. Was a totally undersized edge prospect coming out of Kansas, but has gained weight, plays more of a rundown role, early down impact. Still a guy that can be an effective early down rusher. And then when you get to third downs, and I would say Terrell Basham, by the way, very interchangeable. An effective run defender and an effective pass rusher. So to me, those guys are going to get some early down work. They might even relieve DeMarcus Lawrence, allow Lawrence to focus more on passing downs, even though Lawrence is a freaking amazing run defender too, so you don't want to do that too much. But once you get to later downs, you're going to see Dante Fowler, who they sign. and a little bit of Sam Williams, I think, as well, mixed into the pass rush. Dante Fowler's skill set is comparable to, I think, Randy Gregory. He's not quite as explosive as Randy Gregory, but as I mentioned, you're going to get those kind of mugged up Micah Parsons looks, and you're going to get a lot of pile driving, pocket pushing from Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. So you want that kind of stunting edge. And it's a big part of what made Randy Gregory so productive last year. Someone with a really good first step and bend and quickness that can be effective on those schemed up pressures on stunts. And I think Dante Fowler totally has that skill set. And I think Sam Williams as well, who ran like a 4.38 or some crazy shit, also has that potential. I was not a Sam Williams fan, even on day 2 of the draft. I thought he was kind of a maybe back end of the 3rd round at best. I had a 4th to a 5th round grade on him, but a raw toolsy player that didn't channel those tools into good pass rush play in college. Played in a weird system at Ole Miss, though. Wasn't always asked to rush the passer from a traditional sense. Sometimes those are the players that are the easiest for someone that watches the film to miss on. Had off the field concerns as well. I'm going to be honest on this one. I don't see it with Sam Williams. Didn't think he was a good 2nd round pick. I hope he proves me wrong. Excited to see what he can do. Excited to see that 4.4 speed out there, but I don't see much from him this year or really ever. Cowboys fans will be upset about that, but that's one I'm confident in enough to kind of lay it out there and say it's going to be a big surprise to me if he's ever really much for the Cowboys at all, other than, what Dorrance Armstrong has been, really, at best. You also have Chauncey Golston here, who's a good kind of early down worker, physical player against the run, and you're running pretty dang deep at edge at that point. So I'm obviously not worried about the edge group here. They're enough to get you close to the top 10 in pass rush, and they have good depth from a run defense perspective too. But it's the interior that's really bad here, man. You've got pretty much across the board complete liabilities in run defense. I like Odigizua. I'm going to talk about him as a pass rusher for a second, but undersized dude, was not a good run defender as a rookie. I don't think that'll ever be his game. Neville Gallimore got hurt last year, has some potential across the board, but no established ability against the run. Carlos Watkins, a big-bodied dude, might be their best run defender up front. Tristan Hill kind of came along, played okay last year, but from a run defense perspective, nope. John Ridgeway was drafted to be that big-bodied run defender. Just such a poor athlete, and I don't think he's some dominant run defender, but might be their best run defender right now. Quinton Bohan is a space-eating nose tackle that can't really shed blocks or be much of a physical presence. He's just big. So that's out of the way. There's really not a whole lot more to say about it. This is one of the squishiest interior defensive lines. It hurts this team's run defense. It showed up in the playoffs against the Niners. It's a major concern for this team, period. There's no way around it. From a pass rush perspective, you have some athletes that can at least play off of all of the other stuff they've got going on. I do really like Osa as a pass rusher. Loved him coming out. Thought they stole him in the 3rd round. Was not a big surprise to see him have a productive rookie season. He plays low to the earth because he is shorter, but he is not weak for his size. So he has power and he has really good quickness to get around guys. Perfect stunt man up front for all this stuff that they do. And he's a piece. But beyond him, again, really not a whole lot of interesting stuff. Neville Gallimore theoretically can be a good pass rusher, but has shown none of that at the next level. Got hurt last year. And then really the only other guy is Tristan Hill, who was also hurt last year. When he came back, looked like a better version of his former self. I think he's entering year 4 now, a 2nd round pick. Has athletic upside, and I think the guy to keep an eye on if he's healthy to maybe be a good number 2 interior piece this year, but not counting on it. There's no way around it. It's not a good interior group. It holds this D-line back a little bit, but you have definitely some excitement on the edge. And then with the linebackers, really fun group. of course, you have Micah Parsons, who we're going to have to revisit. You have Leighton Vander Esch, and now Anthony Barr. So 3 guys that I think are all going to play significant snaps. And I like the Barr signing for various reasons, because obviously you know what Leighton Vander Esch is your Mike, good run defender, pretty stiff at this stage in his career, and not the best cover player, but he is kind of locked in as that Mike. But Parsons moves all over the place, and Anthony Barr allows kind of, it's more than just depth to be a Micah Parsons backup, which he is. He has a similar skill set, so to speak, because Barr was a college pass rusher and has been a good pass rusher as a linebacker in Minnesota. So he's not just good depth, but it allows you to, put Micah Parsons at edge and just use Anthony Barr as your number 2 linebacker. It allows you to bluff Micah Parsons and blitz Anthony Barr as another pass rusher opposite of him. It allows some really interesting creative freedom for Dan Quinn, and it's going to be a fun group to see. There's no linebacker room in the league like this. These guys are all over 250 pounds in 2022. That is unheard of. So you are going to have some question marks from a coverage perspective with these guys being so big, especially with Vander Esch, who I mentioned being a little stiff, and Anthony Barr has never been a great covered linebacker either. Again, he's basically an edge rusher being used as a linebacker. Micah Parsons is just such a freak athlete that he can man guys up, and even as the year went on, his zone instincts got better. I do think that part of his game is just going to continue to grow, but they don't always use him as a cover player, right? More often than not, he's actually rushing the passers. So you do have some question marks there. I don't think it's a bad group. They rank 21st for me for coverage. And there's so much to Micah Parsons' game that it's almost hilarious that we haven't even gotten a chance to mention what he does as an off-ball linebacker in run defense, which you can't say it's what he's best at because he's incredible as a pass rusher, but in year 1, he was already one of the better run-defending off-ball linebackers in the league. And that was the bill on him at Penn State was, man, he just is, as we mentioned, 250 pounds. He has legitimate 4.4 speed. Didn't he outrace Tyreek Hill at the Pro Bowl? Like, obviously, he's not faster than Tyreek Hill, but there's something to that. And he's got pretty good run diagnostics, and it showed in his rookie year. This is something that a lot of linebackers struggle with, and really from the get-go, he was tracking ball carriers, stacking and shedding, taking the right approach angles, and that's stuff that will likely only get better in time. You're talking about one of the most impactful defensive players in the entire league, and someone that you can pretty easily see a world where he is one of the 5 best pass rushers in football and one of the 5 best overall linebackers in football. So he's a major impact for the linebacker run defense grade that comes in 7th. And even his ability in coverage is probably going to continue to grow, where you can see that 21st ranking for coverage improving as well. But it's almost like irrelevant with Parsons because you're just going to want to use him as a rusher more consistently because it's more valuable. And then, of course, we kind of mentioned Vander Esch earlier for run defense, and Anthony Barr, if and when he's even on the field, is sort of a missile without a targeting system, if you will. Really fast, really good tackler, but just takes bad angles oftentimes and can lose some of that gap discipline at times as well. You have good depth, I would say. Jabril Cox, good kind of mid-round pick last year. Some people were higher on him than others. Devin Harper, kind of a special teamer, speedster guy, doesn't really know what he's doing. Luke Gifford is what he is, veteran backup. They do draft Damone Clark, who won't be able to play this year, but it's probably going to end up looking terrible looking back on it. But just to put some things in perspective, I actually had, before I learned about the injury, a higher grade on Damone Clark than I did on Quay Walker, who the Packers took in the first round. I thought his coverage instincts were better, and he was a comparable run defender, comparable athleticism. So really fluid mover, and played a good role for LSU last year. And if he gets healthy, he could give you an answer long term next year to both Van Der Esch, who's back here, I think on a 1-year deal, has some kind of injury questions long term, and Anthony Barr, obviously not a long term answer either. So I like that they have Damone Clark there kind of looking towards the future a little bit. Good use of a draft pick there. So yeah, a pretty good linebacker room. Better as far as their physical presence than they are as cover players, but certainly not a question mark, I think, for this defense. I do think there's some question marks as you get to the secondary. They rank 22nd for me for coverage, 16th for DB run defense. So the conversation starts with Trayvon Diggs. I don't even really want to get that far into it. He is not a great cover corner. I don't even know if he's a good cover corner. What he is incredibly instinctive and a ball hawking corner. You might get to 6 interceptions by accident, but you don't get to 12 by accident, right? Like, he had that many picks for a reason, and he got all pro votes because of those interceptions. He is an incredibly aggressive corner. It's almost like most people would play Madden as a corner. Like, you're constantly like intentionally baiting the quarterback, kind of trailing on purpose, like, oh no, I'm beat. Whoops. And then he accelerates and gets a pick. Like, he messes with quarterbacks. And there's something to that. But it also intentionally led to him literally giving up more yards than any corner in football. That's not a fake stat. Like, PFF tracks that stuff. And for the most part, they know whose fault it is. And more often than not, it was Trayvon Diggs' fault. Biting on double moves, getting outplayed, thinking he can trail a receiver, and the guy just pulls away from him. We saw even like AJ Green kind of roasted him. So like, he's not a good cover corner, but you have to factor in the playmaking. And when he gets those interceptions, it's a game-changing play. So it's a tough balance, it's a tough conversation. I think most people are in agreement there. There might be some Cowboys fans that look at the interception numbers and say, oh, he's top 5 corner, he's an all-pro corner. It's really not that simple. I would much rather have Trayvon Diggs be a number 2 corner, similar to what Marcus Peters is for Baltimore, where not only are you matching up with a number 2 wide receiver where just naturally his coverage is going to be tighter as opposed to having to cover Devontae Adams and Justin Jefferson and Brandon Ayuk. Although, Debo, that's different conversation there. But anyway, his coverage is going to be tighter being a number 2 corner, and he's going to see more targets his way because you could have a more lockdown guy on the other side. The quarterback is forced to come your way, where those baiting abilities and ball hawking abilities can be more effective. So ideally you can get that someday. But for now, he is forced into a number 1 corner role where he will get beat and he will make some plays. It's a tough balance. I just say he's a good starting corner. There is not a number 1 opposite of him. The only guy here that could maybe be that guy is Kelvin Joseph, who I'll get to. But you got Jordan Lewis in the nickel, good player. Starting caliber nickel, nothing more, nothing less at this point. I think that's pretty safe to say. Similar with Anthony Brown, who's spent most of his career in the nickel, kind of was forced to go outside, and I think he's solid, really good long speed, physical player, but just not the best technique and will get beat. So you're fine there, but like I said, I would much rather have maybe Kelvin Joseph or somebody else step into a role as a more lockdown cover corner. And Joseph absolutely can be that guy. He just has to figure it out off the field because he had maturity concerns coming out of college, and he had something happened. I don't want to butcher it, but I know he was under some sort of legal deal that he got off the hook. Or was innocent, or whatever happened. He's clear now. He's good to go, but something's going on with him off the field. That is clear. And even Jerry Jones had to sit him down and was like, dude, cut the shit. Like, you have unbelievable potential if you put it together. And if he does, he could be that number one. He's got the length, the speed. His tape has been very good, both in college and here. It's just a matter of him putting it together, and he's not going to start until they trust him out there. So potential is there. Keep an eye on him. Something could click, and he could blow up, or he just could not have it. So very polarizing player. They spent a high second-round pick on him, and I'm not kidding when I say his potential is through the roof. Really, really incredible athlete and a good corner when he's out there. So they do have someone to kind of have some hope for in that cornerback room. Beyond him, the depth sucks. There's no way around it. Nashawn Wright can't cover anyone. Big, stiff corner, good in run defense. CJ Goodwin, a special teamer. They do draft Deron Bland, kind of a height, speed type of prospect. I liked Isaac Taylor Stewart as like a day 3 pick. They get him as an undrafted pickup. Wouldn't be surprised if he makes this team and ends up a better player than Deron Bland. But yeah, they don't have depth. They don't even have like any star players with their corners, depending on how you feel about Trayvon Diggs. So it's just kind of a meh group of corners. Same thing kind of goes for the safeties. These guys all sort of play their role. You got Donovan Wilson, who did miss some pretty significant time last year, and then Malik Hooker kind of stepped in, and they kind of ended up in a bit of a competition. This is interesting. Hooker's actually listed as the starting safety right now. That seems weird to me. I feel like they would probably go back to Donovan Wilson if he's healthy, but Hooker is a former first-round pick with a lot of talent that when he played last year didn't show that he was bad. So those two might be flipped. You might have Hooker as the starter and Donovan Wilson as more of that dime safety. But either way, I don't feel great about either or really am concerned about either of those players. I think just both solid cover players. Maybe Malik Hooker can get back to being a really high-end, rangy free safety. He's kind of had his career derailed a little bit the last couple years, but I guess I wouldn't be shocked if Malik Hooker had a breakout year. And then you have Jaron Kearse, who's that box safety through and through, plays the majority of his snaps like as a linebacker, slot corner, overhang defender. He's the tight end guy, right? And he's really freaking good at that one specific role. But as far as rotating to too high or dropping into a hook zone, he's fine, but not a lot of range or impact from that perspective. So he plays his role as a tight end eraser and a run defender in the box, and that's pretty much what he's going to do. Your safety depth, you've got a few names there. You got Israel Mukuamu, who is very tall, stiff, kind of D-back, I guess. He played corner and safety in college. I know I was never a big fan of him. I had a 6th-round grade on him, and he hasn't really shown to be a good cover player. They do take Marquise Bell as an undrafted free agent. Makes so much sense here. They've got Jaron Kearse on a 2-year deal, who's not young, Jaron Kearse. He'll be probably about 30 by the time that contract's up. And Marquise Bell is so similar. I think he's 6'3", 215, a lot of speed, downhill hitting ability. Reminds me so much of a young Jaron Kearse, who was a 7th-round pick, by the way, who can make an impact on special teams and hopefully develop as a cover player in a couple years. So it was a really nice pickup there. Even like Tyler Coyle and Wanye Thomas, unproven players, but both some potential in their own right for low-level investments. So it's an interesting group of safeties as far as the depth goes, but behind Hooker and Wilson and Kearse, no one you can trust right now. So yeah, 22nd for really the secondary ranking being the coverage, and then 16th as far as run support with Jaron Kearse being a big impact specifically down there in the box. So that's going to give us the 15th ranked pass defense and the 23rd ranked run defense. I think you've got really good pass rush up front. You have an adequate secondary on the back end and a pretty good coaching staff that gives you at least a top half pass defense. And from a run defense, there's obvious questions with that D-line. It's just something you can't really dance around. You need big steps up from guys like Gallimore and Tristan Hill if they're even going to be a okay run defense, but I wouldn't expect that from what we've seen from those guys. So it holds them back a little bit. Teams are going to be able to run on the Cowboys just as they were in the playoffs last year. It's not a huge surprise there. It ultimately gives them the 19th ranked defense. Again, everybody, please let me know what you think of that format for the defense. I can easily go back to the way it's been, or I can keep this. And I think I will actually even run a poll on Twitter for which format you prefer. I personally like this better. I think it flows a little bit better. But yeah, let me know. Let's tie a ribbon on this thing. Let's take a look, recap the strengths and weaknesses here. So the strengths for me is really just like high-end offensive talent in general. CeeDee Lamb, Tyron Smith, Zach Martin. You have some superstar players that are going to elevate players around them. I think the run game's a strength. They rank 7th there. Good O-line there, good running backs, good coordinators, like should be able to run the ball very effectively. They have an obnoxious pass rush. Even if it ranks 11th, like head up, it's one of the more frustrating pass rushes to deal with because I think it's just mentally exhausting trying to worry where all these different pieces are coming from. And then general depth on defense is pretty good. Like down the board, you got edge depth, you have linebacker depth, you have... I think like having Kelvin Joseph as a 4th corner is nice if you have an injury, and having 3 safeties is pretty nice. Like you can afford really 1 injury at each position group and really not miss a beat, which is nice. Weaknesses, I think you have a fraud as your head coach. That speaks for itself. You have certain weak spots on the offensive line that good teams might be able to pick apart. You have a really squishy interior defensive line. They're going to have to prove that they can defend the run. And then they have a lack of star coverage players. I think the really good receiving cores are going to be able to separate with relative ease against these corners. And then lastly, like kicker might be a question mark. I think they have an undrafted rookie right now as their starting kicker, which, speaking of which, they come in as a tier 4 special teams. It is really because of that kicker situation. For the most part, they covered kicks well, and they have a good punter. So it's not a terrible special teams, but they do have some question marks with their kicker, which is the most important part. But we're gonna tie a ribbon on this thing by looking at the schedule here, their Vegas over/under, where my win projections are for the Cowboys ultimately. I think I am a little bit higher on this Cowboys team. Most people expected them to be revealed already, and some people have been picking the Eagles well ahead of the Cowboys, and I disagree. I think the Cowboys with Dak Prescott instead of Jalen Hurts are a better bet. It's not a guarantee, but I think that does make me, in general, a little bit higher in the Cowboys. But let's look at the schedule here. Vegas has their over/under at 10 wins, so they're buying into them. I think the Eagles was 9.5, right? Like they do play the AFC South and the NFC North, so they are going to get a better run of easier games than some other teams too. But their start to their schedule is certainly not easy. I think you look at this, you can easily see them starting 2-4, 3-3 at best. Maybe you have the Bucks and Bengals at home. I think they're probably losing both of those. They'll at least be underdogs. A home opener, Sunday Night Football. There's gonna be a lot of energy in the building. So it's certainly not a guarantee that they lose to the Bucks, but they will be underdogs. Bengals, defending AFC champs, coming to town. A lot of early season question marks for this team. I think they start 0-2. Then they get to bounce back. Giants, Washington, hopefully more winnable games for them. But then they got to go to LA against the defending champs. They got to go to Philly. Never an easy game. That's a primetime game. And then you get literally a 4-game stretch against the NFC North. Detroit and Chicago at home should be able to take care of business there, hit the bye week, get healthy. Then they got to go to Lambeau and go to Minnesota. Might as well put up a team hotel at Wisconsin Dells and stay in my neck of the woods there for those couple weeks. But I think you can see a stretch where they kind of go probably 3-1 against the NFC North, get back to 500-ish by the end of that stretch, and then your schedule lightens up. You have another round against your division, which they should be favored in all those games. They have The Colts and the Titans are going to be tough games, but then kind of some gimmies against the Texans and the Jags. So I think it's pretty likely you're walking out of that Vikings game, week 11, at either 5-5, 6-4, and then if you can win somewhere between 4 and 5 games after that in what's a pretty lighter load, you're looking at 10 to 11 wins. I think it makes sense, the Vegas over-under. I think it's right. I think 10 wins makes a lot of sense for this team. And I would just say no bet. But I do think this team wins the East in more scenarios than not. But it's not a guarantee. They got to execute. They got to hope the Eagles don't take some massive step forward with their quarterback situation. You got to hope even like Washington maybe can figure some stuff out. So it's not a guarantee, but I do think they should be the favorites for this division. And then it's Mike McCarthy in the playoffs again. It's can Dak get over the hump and become a great quarterback? Like, that's maybe the next part of the conversation, but expectations I think should be win the division, get to the playoffs, and hopefully at least win one playoff game this year. But yeah, that is going to do it for my Cowboys deep dive. I really hope you guys enjoyed. Again, make sure you subscribe if you're not already. We had a viewer comment on the last one. It was like, dude, I've been watching you for years and I just found out I'm not subscribed. So if that's you, go ahead and click that subscribe button. Really helps me out. Make sure you like as well. It helps me even more. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of this ranking. And we'll see you soon for the next deep dive. Peace out.